We were discussing language poetry, and Dave is going to be the person to explain to us what language poetry is and how it works.
Well, when Mike just looked up the phrase, what he found, which goes along with what I think, is that it depends on who you ask as to what it is, even among the practitioners of it. But John Ashbery is one of the more famous or noteworthy practitioners of language poetry. What came to me when Connie was asking me about this or talking about this was that some of his poems to me are like walking down a city street and you hear a snippet here, a snippet there of the conversations of many different people as you're going. So it's not one stream of consciousness, it's a group of not necessarily related thoughts put together, but he orders them, he gives them, it's not just a random thing that he's done. He gives them an order of a kind, and if you get in the right frame of mind, you can find a kind of meaning in it. But another thing we were talking about was how it's a little bit like, at least for me, it's a little bit like listening to atonal music, where there's a lot of dissonance in the sense that it's not harmony in the traditional sense, but there is harmony of a kind. It just doesn't sound like harmony. It's dissonant. So anyway, to me, I have to be in the right frame of mind to listen to a piece by Schoenberg or Webern or practitioners of the 12-tone system, which never really gained that much popularity because it's hard to listen to. But if you're in the right frame of mind, it can be very, very fulfilling, and they make you feel like you've hit on something. You found something that you're lucky to find.
We travel in the same circles. Is there anybody that we know that does this type of poetry, this language poetry?
I would say that the best one, my favorite one is Sharon Black.
Okay.
She writes some absolutely fabulous language poems. You could listen to them and realize that there is a meaning here, but it's not the most important. The literal meaning is not the most important thing going on here.
Is it the turning of the phrase?
It's the choice of language. It's the turning of phrase, you could say. There's a mystery about it. I mean, there's something serious going on here, and it works even if you can't exactly put your finger on what it is. You almost have to hear it and read it, and then hear it again, and get in this frame of mind that helps if you be open to it. Almost in a sense that I think that people do when they meditate. I'm not a meditator, but I do it in my own way. But my idea of meditating is to smoke a cigarette and drink some coffee, or smoke several cigarettes and drink some coffee. But it's almost like a meditative state.
So you would say that sort of poem wouldn't necessarily work at a reading where you're trying to take it all in one burst.
Well, I actually hosted a reading with Sharon as one of the featured readers, and when you hear a series of her poems, one after another, I think it's easier then to get into that groove with her. And she's just so adept at doing this that really halfway through the first one, if you're an avid poetry listener, if you really like consuming poetry, you'll probably be going right along with her, because she just writes in this way that pulls you in. It grabs your attention. There was something about the turn of phrase, the choice of words, that is just so arresting that you can't help but think, well, where's she going to go with this? And she's not the only one. Ethel Racken is another really, really good one who comes to mind.
Yeah, I know Sharon. Haven't heard her in a long time, but I know of her work. I didn't realize that that's what she was doing.
That's what she's been doing for a while anyway. In the past she may not have been, but she's been doing that for a while.
Now I do hear about language poetry something that's becoming more popular, or is it still like a much more underground thing?
Well, if you go online and look up that phrase, you can certainly find plenty of it. I don't know how mainstream it's ever going to be, if it ever was or has been. I think it may have been a movement that has had at least one peak and a valley, and maybe will be going through peaks and valleys as people rediscover it over the years. I don't think it'll ever disappear, because there's going to be just enough. I think people who there's always a little bit of an audience for Schoenberg. There's always going to be a little bit of an audience for Ashbery.
Maybe saying mainstream for any kind of poetry might be sort of an oxymoron. Anyway,
I think when we're talking in the context of poetry, which is this little world unto itself.
Right.
But within that world, there are people whose names are more familiar than others. And if you talk about Dylan Thomas, a lot of people, at least in high school, read "Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night," and maybe they didn't get it, and maybe it didn't last with them, or maybe it haunts them to this day. Or is somewhere in the back of their minds. The world goes, let's face it, there are a lot more football fans.